So, the road to 2K17 continues today with another brand new 2K16 video. Today's video is a series compilation of ways to use weapons in the current game. So, we have got tables, ladders, chairs, steel steps, and even a singable cane. Now, the video will feature all the basic ways to use these weapons, as well as a bunch of ways you potentially might not have seen before. Anyway, intro out of the way, let's waste no more time and get into it, kicking it off with ways to use the steel chair, which will then be followed by ways to use ladders, tables, steel steps, and a singable cane, so enjoy. So first up, the most obvious way to use a chair in 2K16 is of course a chair shot. Now, this is not as boring as it might sound because in 2K16 the chair shots are actually newly reanimated, so these are actually really cool. Now, as seen here, there is the standard chair shot, there is a chair shot to the back of the head, there is also a running chair shot which is now a gut shot, plus if your opponent is grounded either face up or face down, you get a chair shot across the front or the back. There is also a brand new chair reversal animation, which as you can see is really awesome, and overall these new animations were really cool additions to this year's game. Our second way to use the chair in 2K16 is the running chair dropkick in the corner. Now, as cool as this might be, and as cool as this might have been in the older games, this one isn't as good as it could be due to the move, in my experience at least, being glitchy and not really connecting like it should. As you can see, most of the time it doesn't connect as it should do or as you would want it to, but the idea is there, so if 2K can fix this a little, this could again be a nice move in the game. The move can be done by doing a running strike with the chair in hand with your opponent in the sitting quarter position. Next up, a very simple one, which is doing any of your normal moves or finishers on the chairs. This is especially badass when doing moves like a pole driver or other head focused moves on the chairs. As you can see, it looks really cool, and although I don't think doing this adds any damage to the move, it is pretty awesome and always fun, so be sure to give it a go. Now, moving on to some chair moves on the ground, we have got either the neck or the leg trapped in the chair with the big stomp. Now, if you don't know, both these moves have been in the series for quite some time now, and these moves can be done either at the head or the feet of your opponent by doing a chair grapple when your opponent is face up on the mat. With this one, you don't have much time to actually do the move, so you gotta be quick, but a pretty cool move and painful to compare moves when they do actually connect, with the neck variation looking especially brutal. My fifth way to use a chair in 2K16 is the chair wedge in the corner with the Irish whip into it. Now, like some of the other featured moves in the video, this one isn't new and could be done in plenty of the previous games, but whilst there isn't anything new about the move, it is still fun to do. So if you don't know, this move can be done by pressing the action button in the corner with the chair to wedge it, and then by doing a normal Irish whip as you would normally do the standard way, resulting in your opponent going skull first into the steel chair. A pretty awesome move. Another chair move that has again been in the series for quite some time, but this time a move that does seem to be improved, and that move is the chair DDT. Now, in the previous games you would see a grapple animation when grabbing your opponent for the move. This year though, the animation has been removed, which results in you going straight into the gut shot before the DDT, so maybe a small change, but definitely a change that makes quite a bit of difference and makes the move look much better. And in terms of chair moves in 2K16, in my opinion at least, this is one of the best. But finally, probably my favourite 2K16 chair move, and one of the most satisfying chair moves to connect within the game, and that move is the concerto. Now, this move can be done by placing one chair under your opponent's head when face down, before delivering the chair shot of the second chair when standing near it. Now, in my experience, this is not the easiest chair move to connect with, but when everything falls into place, the 2K16 concerto is definitely one of the best chair moves in the game. The concerto, of course, was made famous in the WWE by Edge and Christian, as featured here in the video, and I think it's fair to say that in 2K16, as Edge and Christian would say, the concerto definitely reeks of awesomeness, and that move concludes my 7 ways to use the chair in WWE 2K16. Let's kick this off with the basics. One of the most obvious ways to use a ladder in 2K16 is to use the ladder as a straight up striking weapon. Now, there's a few strikes that can be done in the game, including a standard standing strike, a corner strike, a grounded strike, and of course a running strike. Another way to use the ladder is the ladder grapple. Now technically there is other ladder grapples in a sense that we'll get to shortly, but as far as the standard ladder grapples go, there is only one, which is the shot to the gut and then a shot across the back. So in fairness, a pretty decent looking animation, but hopefully we can get more here in future games of the series. Now, as you probably know, another thing that you can do with the ladder in 2K16 is to place the ladder in one of the four corners. Once placed in the corner, there is a few cool things that can be done. These include a grapple like a German suplex or a powerbomb, a running strike to either the front or to the back, or one of my favourites, the strong Irish whip into the ladder, which has a few different pretty cool looking animations. Let's go back to the basics of the next one, because another thing that can be done with the ladder in 2K16 is to simply throw the ladder at your opponent. Now admittedly, most of the time this is not that effective, although as you'll see now, at times this can be fairly effective. So technically this does a small bit of damage to the opponent, and as I say, not always that effective and not a technique you necessarily can use that often, but still, given the right circumstances, this can be useful and is yet another way to use the ladder in this year's game. Another of the most obvious ways to use a ladder in a ladder match environment is to climb it and jump off it. Now these are for sure some of the most fun moves to do involving ladders in 2K16, and moves that can be utilised from this position include moves done to a standing opponent and also to a grounded opponent. For example, this awesome looking Phoenix Splash showcased by Seth Rollins. Yet another cool way and effective way to use a ladder is to simply knock your opponent off of one. This can be done when the opponent is mid-climbing, when they've actually reached the top, and also when they've actually reached the top and are standing on top of it. So I'm sure you would agree with me, some pretty painful looking stuff, especially brutal when done near the edge of the ring. Although alternatively, something similar that can be done that's just as, if not more effective than this, is to hit them off with a springboard move or a high flyer move. This again looks really cool and again is pretty painful looking. One of my favourite things to do with ladders in the WWE game series that not everyone likely knows is possible is to utilise a ladder by running up it. When running up ladders in 2K16, you can hit some form of running strike, a running grapple, although my favourite of the bunch is the ladder to ladder jump, which given the right situations can be super handy and super effective. Now, whilst climbing the ladders and all that crazy stuff is obviously fun, another fun way to use the ladder is to simply do your normal moves or even your finishers on the top of one. Now, I'm not really sure if this causes any extra damage or not, but still kind of satisfying to hit your finisher on a well-positioned ladder, or better yet, to hit your diving finisher with your opponent nicely placed actually on one. There is also some other moves in the game that, whilst technically don't directly use ladder for damage, can only be done when a ladder is involved. So basically, when your opponent is in the hanger position, some pretty cool moves can be done. These cool moves include a powerbomb, an electric chair drop, a springboard drop kick, and most people's favourite, the pretty epic looking super spear. So we just mentioned one powerbomb that can be done involving the ladder, but there is actually two, and the second one involving the ladder is this one that can be done when your opponent has climbed the ladder and you do a grapple from the behind position. So kind of cool, especially if your chosen superstar is actually someone who uses the powerbomb, say for example a Kevin Nash or a Kevin Owens. And alternatively, also from this position, you can also simply just pull them off and hit your desired move or desired finisher. Another awesome way to use the ladder in 2K16 is to put your opponent actually through one, almost like a table. Now from my experience, this generally happens when the ladder is placed in one of the four corners, with you normally involving a second ladder. So for example, you could push one ladder over, sending it crashing down and through the second ladder, or you could do some type of move off one ladder and through the other ladder. Again, pretty painful looking stuff, so if you haven't already, then be sure to give this one a go. As we just saw in the previous clip, some of the bigger moves in the game involving ladders do involve coming face to face at the top of one. Now from this position, several different things can be done. You could go back and forth with a series of strikes. You could hit a strong strike, which if hit when dazed, will send your opponent crashing off the ladder. There is of course some more basic grapples like you're now seeing, plus how can we forget ladder finishers that we're going to get to now. So ladder finishers in 2K16 for me remain some of the best moves to do with ladders in the entire game series. Now in order to do a ladder finisher in 2K16, firstly you're going to have the ladder finisher ability, plus in the match itself you're going to need a stored finisher. Now some of the noteworthy ladder finishers in 2K16 include an AA, a rock bottom and an RKO. Now unfortunately we've not had any new ladder finishers added to this series for quite some time now, but you never know, with 2K17 later this year, hopefully a new one or two might be added. But either way, despite that and despite the old animations, ladder finishers in my opinion remain pretty damn awesome nonetheless, and ladder finishers will conclude our awesome ways to use ladders in WWE 2K16. So let's kick this off with the most basic of the bunch, the table strike. You can strike your opponent with the table in the game using the strike button from the front or back, the corner, the ground and from the running positions. Admittedly, not the most exciting way to use the table, but still definitely a simple yet effective way to use one. Another way to use the table is to throw one at your opponent. Just like the ability to do this with the ladder as we covered in the previous video, this might not be an obvious way to use a table, but in the right situation it can definitely be a handy thing to know. Next up, we have got the table grapple. Not much to say here, as there is only one table grapple in the game, and that grapple is a quick shot to the gut, resulting in putting your opponent onto the table. It's probably worth noting here that whilst on the table, a few grapples can be done to the upper, middle and lower sections. There is also some grapples when your opponent is placed in the corner against the table. Some painful looking stuff indeed. Moving away from the standard table temporarily and turning our attention to the announcer's table, which just like the normal table can be used in multiple ways. You can either bounce your opponent off the table with a grapple or even an Irish whip, and you can obviously put your opponent through the table if you have the announce table OMG moment equipped. Whilst the table finishers do technically come under one section and are all done in the same way, there is three main variations that can be done. These include a finisher with both superstars on the table, a finisher from the floor position, and a diving finisher. For me at least, the diving table finishers remain some of the best, although they do remain fairly limited. But with a glitch found in my 5 Things You Might Not Know series, there is a way to do regular diving finishers through the announcer's table, so if you're interested, feel free to check that out, link on the screen. It's also worth noting here that the good thing about using the announcer's table is that putting your opponent through one does not result in a DQ finish and does result in a victory if used in a table match. But let's get back to the regular tables, because before you can put your opponent through a regular table, which is likely going to be your main aim when using one, you need to actually get a table set up. So the regular way, in the corner, you can lean one against the ropes, and you also have the ability to double stack the tables one on top of another. Another way to use the table is to create what I like to call the steel table. What this basically is a table laid out over two sets of steel steps, which does involve some careful positioning, but when this does work out right, some very cool spots like you're seeing on the screen can be done. Alternatively, you can also lay the table out in a similar way without the steel steps and simply do your moves on it. But of course, probably the most obvious way to use the table is of course to put your opponent through one. Putting your opponent through a table is obviously a pretty epic thing to do and can be done from a variety of positions. You can do a front grapple, a back grapple, a corner move, a top rope move, a diving move, an apron move. Pretty much any position in the game can be used to put your opponent through a table. This also including one or two of the OMG moments and even ladder moves and finishers. Now obviously these are pretty awesome and can be as complicated or as easy as you want them to be. However, with a little creativity, some pretty epic spots can be had, and I'm sure you would agree with me, some pretty painful looking stuff. And finally, potentially saving the most extreme one till last, you have the ability to set the table on fire, creating a flaming table. Now, whilst this is something we really don't see in actual WWE anymore, it can still be done in the games. For those that might not know, this can simply be done by approaching a setup table when you have a stored finisher and pressing the finisher button next to the table. This can obviously be pretty epic and definitely helps towards creating some extreme moments. And who doesn't love a good old flaming table? Of course, the main thing that can be done with the still steps is a variety of strikes. Now, there are 3 main strike animations for the still steps, and these including a grounded strike, a running strike, and of course the standard strike. Now, with the standard strike especially, it can be used in various other situations, including for example in the corner in the normal or center position, plus the Tree of Woe, which as you can see can be pretty devastating to the Family Jewels area. Also, just to add to that is the reverse animation for the still step strikes, which looks pretty cool and leaves your opponent vulnerable to a returning still step attack. Another way to use the still steps is to knock your opponent out of the ring or off the top rope. Now, to knock your opponent out of the ring, you would need to give them a strike when they are standing on the apron position, and a pretty cool way to knock your opponent off the top rope, aside from a straight up running attack, is to actually throw the still steps at your opponent from the outside of the ring. Once again, as you can see, some awesome stuff. Another of the most simple ways to use the still steps is of course to Irish with your opponent at them. Now, this can be done from a couple of angles and is definitely a simple but effective way to use the still steps in 2K16. Yet another way to use the still steps is to actually try and do your moves on them. Now, for whatever reason, since the games went new gen, this doesn't work quite as well as it used to, but given the right move and the right situation and a little bit of luck, this is something that can be done, so always an option to keep in mind. However, my personal favourite way to use the still steps in the game is to use them in tandem with a table and create what I like to call the still table. So what the still table basically is 2 sets of still steps pushed together with a table then laid out over the top. Now, positioning for this can be a little tricky and a little patience might be needed, but it's basically done by dropping the still steps at the right angles, then pushing them together by simply running at the side of them. Then of course you want to add the table into the mix, and you can do so by picking up the table and doing a running animation towards the side of the still steps, then dropping the table and laying it out over the top of both sets of steps. And yeah, the still table is a pretty awesome thing to try out, so definitely give us a go. And the still table is going to close out today's episode of how to use still steps in WWE 2K16. So let's see what we can do with this one, and let's get this underway. Kicking it off with the most obvious way to use the Singapore cane, and that way of course is to strike your opponent. Now, there is a variety of strike positions that you can use this with the main ones including a general strike, a grounded strike, the corner strike, and the running strike. As you can see, this weapon has had a complete overhaul for 2K16, but the best is still to come, so stay tuned as we're going to be getting to that momentarily. But before we do get to that, a minor way that can technically be used for the Singapore cane is for you to do your moves on it. Obviously, the Singapore cane has a small surface area, so doing this isn't all that effective, but it's technically something that can be done, so just want to give it a mention. But back to the good stuff. Another of the brand new things that you can do this year with the weapon is the various corner grapples, which are in fact 3 sets of corner chokes. So we have the front corner choke, the back corner choke, and the grounded corner choke. As I say, really nice stuff here and some awesome additions. Hopefully we're going to be getting some more quality improvements in this area for 2K17, which of course is just a few months away. Now, as good as the strikes and the grapples might be, there is some equally awesome reversal animations. As we know, most weapons in the game only feature 1 or maybe 2 reversal animations. However, the Singapore cane, being the beast that it is, has multiple. So once again, let's see what we've got. There is of course the more general reversals to regular strikes and running strikes. And what's even more cool is that each of the 3 corner chokes each have their own unique reversal animation as well. So there is the front corner reversal, the back corner reversal, and the sitting corner reversal. Once again, as you can see, some truly awesome stuff. So the animations in mind for the striking, the grappling, and the reversals. For me, as far as the standard weapons go, the Singapore cane, also known as the kendo stick, is the best weapon in the entire game and the best weapon that 2K16 has to offer. So that is it for this one, but I hope you did enjoy this ultimate compilation of ways to use weapons in 2K16. Stay tuned to the channel for the 2K17 version coming in just a few months' time. And until next time, this has been 101, and I will see you all on the next one.